watching a program the other night with a presentation at Glasgow University about 15 years ago with Dr. Martin Hendry. Now, I was actually invited to that presentation. Or to give a presentation at the same time. And then I got uninvited. I wonder why. This was December 2010, so we're talking 15 years ago. And he presented his case for the truth of the Apollo landings, and he disparaged everybody who challenged anything. Because he produced 10 reasons why it must be real.
So let's take a look at what I would regard as the kind of top 10 conspiracy theories, and we'll do our best to get through a selection of them in the time we have today.
And that photograph of Jim Irwin with the flag and the lander and the rover, lovely picture, that one. And that little hill behind him is Mount Hadley Delta.
Yeah, well, how high is that supposed to be?
$13,000 feet.
So it's half the height of Mount Everest?
Well, Mount Everest 29,000, but that's supposed to be about 5 miles away. Why is the texture of the lunar surface, assuming it is, in the front of him, so completely different from what's behind the lander? It makes no sense. And if you use the high definition photograph, you can see it more clearly.
You can actually see it when you zoom in. You can see the Kubrick line.
I think that's rather an insult to the Zeiss lenses on the Hasselblad camera. They're the best lenses around. That's why the Hasselblad camera is such a good camera. It has very good lenses. You'd think to distinguish between the surface texture in a near foreground and the surface texture of the mountain behind Mount Hadley Delta, which would be very similar, but it doesn't. It's washed out. It's completely different because it's a front project. It doesn't matter what projection it is. You're photographing a screen, and that's the effect you get from photographing a screen. You lose definition.
It almost reminds me of this photo when it comes to Apollo 15, because that is 1 mile across. And take a look at that rover. There's no way that that's a mile across. Because you can see every little rock that's down there. And of course, they're going to be larger rocks, but then look at the ones on the hill that are closer. I mean, are you serious?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, you see the drill that they put up at Flagstaff was only 60 feet deep and about 150, 160 feet across. That's exactly what you're looking at. Because if that's a mile across, then you can see 5 miles up, you can see rocks, right? There shouldn't be rocks on that. That's the drill that they created at Flagstaff. There still is apparently some traces of it that can be seen there.
At least they were smart enough to leave the rover and the guy there and the astronaut there, or the person in the astronaut costume there, because now you have something to gauge it by.
Yeah,
There's no way that that's a mile and a half. Now, we're not talking lengthwise, we're talking widthwise. So, I mean, come on. You know, forced perspective is one thing, but when you can actually see the rocks on the side of the hill closer to that rover, at least you have something to gauge it by. There's no way that that's no mile and a half. There's no way.
It's approximate for dimensions about the same size as meteor crater in width across, but it's twice as deep.
Yeah, and meteor crater is a very good method of demonstrating that, because we know the dimensions precisely.
Right. And like I said, if you were at the restaurant level at the CN Tower sitting there, it's what's like 1,280 feet, something like that. That's the depth of Hadley Rill.
And check out the window of the CN Tower, you can hardly see people on the street, let alone you can see a few cars moving around, but that's about it.
If you've ever had the privilege of being there, I never went up to the observation deck, which is higher than that. I was only at the restaurant level on the CN Tower. But when you start looking down and you realize that those other buildings are 50 and 60 stories high, when you're sitting there watching commercial aircraft coming in and you have to lean out the window to see the whole plane because it's disappearing underneath you, it's coming that close to the CN Tower when it's coming into the airport, and they're only halfway up the tower.
You just hope they've seen it.
Imagine a commercial aircraft that you have to look down on when it's landing.
And those buildings are really quite small. You know, they're what, 20 stories high? Hadley Rill is supposed to be that deep. How come you can see so much in it?
I mean, look at the ones of these fellas. They're all hanging on bungees, and they're standing right on the ledge, the highest part of that CN Tower. And now look at the buildings below. That's what you should see on Hadley Rill.
Yeah, well, you're not going to see any rocks down there, are you?
No.
Oh, that's right. I don't see any rocks. By the way, I want to ask everybody out there, in this photo that we're showing right now, tell me if you guys can see any rocks. Anyone out there in the audience, if you can see any rocks down there, I don't care how big they are, but can you see any? I don't know. I can't. Can you, Marcus?
No, you can see a few trucks, a few cars, but that's about it. And you only know they're cars if they've got a sunroof.
So that would mean that we would be looking for a boulder at least the size of a car. But then again, we can use the cars for the boulders to make a comparison. That doesn't even add up.
I mean, there's some quite big buildings there, aren't they? You know, 20, 30 stories high. It makes about 300 foot high. I think that one in the center, the white one, you can probably count the number of floors on it. Probably 40, 50 floors. But that's way down below the level of this deck. If that deck is at 1,000 feet or thereabouts, you'd expect the same perspective in Hadley Rill, and you don't get it.
That's about 60 stories.
Okay.
So that's 600 feet. That building with the two antennas on it.
That's right, about 600 feet. That's quite a big building. If people can't see it, it's because they don't want to see it. They want to believe the fairy story of Apollo. They're not prepared to look at the practicality of it and think it through. I mean, those are very good illustrations of that height. And Meteor Crater, as you say, is the same reported width as Hadley Rill. But you don't get the same perspective. You don't get the same viewpoint.
I mean, even the smaller towers are 20 stories. Those are the ones that almost look like little small tin cans. That's 20-story buildings you're looking at there.
Yeah, they're quite big, 200 foot high, at least.
Yeah.
Exploration, especially that on the moon, holds many dangers. While drawing closer and closer to new discoveries, each footstep also leads into the unknown.
Okay, come on down here. Let's get the frag off of one of these boulders, and we'll head on back to the rover. I don't know. Well, from where about 50 meters from where I guess we'd say we see real outcrop. Can't tell. I can't see the lip of the rill. Oh, gosh, no, Joe. It slopes right on down here. The same slope. It's just a little inflection here.
Hadley Rill, 1,159 feet deep, more than a mile wide, and 50 miles long. Even with reference photos and maps, the lack of atmosphere made judging distance on the moon difficult at best, impossible at times. Imagine standing on the precipice of a hole as deep as the Grand Canyon and not knowing it. The scale of Hadley Rill dwarfs that of the Statue of Liberty, just one of the optical tricks the moon plays on her visitors.
Oh, interesting observation. I've noticed very few people in comments under our videos who will challenge what we say about vacuum. They just don't discuss it. It's as if they don't know what they're talking about. They just accept what NASA tells them. We've introduced various questions. That's all we do. We introduce questions. Subjects which can be examined scientifically, but nobody talks about vacuum. Nobody in the comments talk about vacuum. It's as if they want to ignore it because they know that it's a reasonable subject to challenge Apollo about. The cold welding, the outgassing, the standard scientific results from vacuum testing, but nobody comes, except for Bill Demos, who did come along and say, yeah, you're right, the vacuum will have an effect. I know, it's my job to know. He's one of the very few people who've even acknowledged what we say about vacuum.
Anybody that believes that they landed on the moon, it's really simple. All you have to do is explain it from launch to splashdown. And show that every piece of equipment works flawlessly during that entire thing. Dude, there can't be an error anyway. Not even the smallest amount can go wrong, because otherwise it didn't happen. And that goes right from the fuel numbers, the amount of fuel that they had on board, right on through the landing, the takeoff, why they don't have any coordination on lifting off the lunar surface is absolutely impossible. How they didn't talk to the people in the command module as it's orbiting. That is one of the largest errors out there in the transcript. 3 people on a journey, you just don't talk to one of the persons for 3 days straight. Because if they're not there, if they don't check in every couple of hours in that rotation, if they don't check in with them, there's going to be a problem. If they can't communicate, there's going to be like, what are these guys on the lunar surface going to do? They're dead. If that orbiter isn't up there, they're dead. And the guy that's orbiting up there, if he doesn't hear anything on the ground, why would he stick around? He would have to assume, if he can't communicate with them, that they're no longer alive. And there's going to be a lot of communications about what would happen in those events. But for 3 days, Apollo 15, 16, 17, no communication with the command module from the lunar surface. And if they try and claim, oh, there's a private chat line for them between there and Houston and all of that stuff, right? That's bullshit. Because Houston would be relaying any information from that, if it's a private line, back to the guys on the ground.
Of course they would. You've got to coordinate the takeoff from the surface with the speed and position of the orbiting command module. Otherwise you're going to miss it. And the command module is moving 3 times faster than a high-powered bullet. So you've got to get it right. And if you don't get it right, you haven't got your ride home, especially if they haven't installed the drogue properly.
Let's say they did that they did all the calculations, that they have all that data to get it right. They're taking off from the lunar surface. They don't know exactly how much they weigh because they don't know how much the samples they're bringing back weighs. That's number one. Number two, these rocket engines were hand-built, and they're giving an estimate on what the actual thrust is. Well, what if it's a little bit less by a few hundred pounds? They're not going to take off as fast. They're not going to reach the same height at the same time.
Yeah, well, there's another problem too that Randy was talking about in his interview with Germ Warfare. Those two guys were talking about the fact that if they had their suits on, they most likely did when they took off from the surface, they're still standing beside that engine. This is something that those two were talking about that I never thought of before.
Well, there's an atmosphere in there. The sound is going to transfer off of the lid that's over top of that engine into that spacecraft. It's going to be incredibly loud.
Wouldn't the vibration still vibrate?
The whole floor is going to vibrate.
Okay, if the whole floor is going to vibrate, then it's going to go through their boots and it's going to go up through the suit that has an atmosphere in it and into the microphone.
So you're going to hear it.
Well, they were able to turn a cassette on and go off into the wild blue yonder.
Then there had to be an atmosphere inside of that craft, because how could they hear that if they just put it on, no atmospheres in there, but yet there's an atmosphere in the suit? So obviously the vibrations from the speaker and the cassette recorder are going through the suit.
They write
So when the So the calculations have to be extremely accurate because they don't have control of the engine. So that's all fake? Absolutely. There's nobody in their right mind would design anything like that. Oh, just turn it on, and when you run out of fuel, that's the right spot to be in.
See, my friend, no, apple for it there to be fat one and
All the important things hold on. So you don't know what will happen. You make it is good. And there's a low way to see the parts. You don't need to not
Right, is they all have things like so much in there.
the chemist work. Look over here on the lead. My man, see the business.
And so go to wrong do and this where please want to do do the example. How many was he claiming this was or say something up to the and then we go was the more than you get got to on the and pains to get the between the speed. So it's the people the real sensation of what you can build and the first plan you grab after success and so big they don't it's all over.
You get
Well,